this video, I'll show you how to use the Mann Whitney U Test in SPSS. As you can see from the table of statistical tests, the Mann Whitney U is a non-parametric statistical test. It is using only ordinal data. It is similar to the Wilcoxon test, and it is also similar to the parametric t-test. The difference between the Mann Whitney U and the Wilcoxon test is that the Wilcoxon test is for dependent samples, two dependent samples, or matched pairs, while the Mann Whitney U is for two samples that are independent of each other. I'll show you how to do this, so let's get started. Example number 1. Vaccines are now being distributed across the country. An experiment was conducted to determine the effectiveness of the vaccine. Two groups were assigned. One will have a placebo, the other will have the vaccine. So these two groups are independent. The results they produce are independent of each other. They are not related in any way. Is there a difference between the placebo and vaccine? The effectiveness of the vaccine is shown in the table below. So the treatment will be these drugs over here. Well, a placebo isn't a drug. It's a non-drug. The way to measure it is the number of symptoms that subjects experience after being infected by a vaccine or by a placebo. The null hypothesis would be that there is no difference between the placebo and the vaccine. They would be the same. The alternate hypothesis would be that there is a difference between the placebo and vaccine. Now let's try to do this in SPSS. We're going to create two variables. In this case, one would be a dichotomous variable. A dichotomous variable is a variable that has only two types of data. I'll show you what I mean. I'll set the value of groups into 1 and 2, which is why it is a dichotomous variable. Group 1 would be placebo. Group 2 would be the vaccine. Now this would be nominal. Create another variable, symptoms. This would be an ordinal level of measurement. Now let's input the data. For groups 1, for groups 2, 3, 2. Now, to analyze this data, go to Analyze, Non-Parametric Tests, Legacy Dialogues. This time, 2 independent samples. If the samples are dependent, you will have to use a Wilcoxon test of 2 related samples. This time the samples are independent. Let's use this. I'll put this grouping variable here. Since this is a dichotomous variable, I'll define groups into 1 and 2. I'll put symptoms into the test variable list, and I'll make sure that the test type is Mann Whitney U. Let's press OK. Now you'll be given two tables, the ranks and the test statistics. Now if you would be solving the Mann Whitney U test manually using pen and paper, you might need this. Right now we will be focusing on SPSS. The test statistics that you would want to be looking at is the exact significance, which would be 0.008. And again, the p-value is equal to 0.008 is less than 0.05. Therefore, the decision would be to reject the null hypothesis. The conclusion would be the data provided sufficient evidence that there is a difference between the placebo and vaccine. Now let's try another example. In this example, the sample sizes are not equal. Boys, n is equal to 4, and girls, n is equal to 5. But it could still work. The test still applies for unequal samples. Just make sure that the difference is not that great. Like for example, boys n is only equal to 1 and girls n is equal to 10. That wouldn't be reasonable. So 4 boys and 5 girls are randomly selected from an identical population. They participated in a CrossFit competition. During training, is there a difference in muscle cramps experienced? Now you don't need to consider this identical population. What's important is that boys and girls, when they produce results after the competition, the results are independent of each other. Now during training, is there a difference in muscle cramps experience? Which means our null hypothesis would be there is no difference in muscle cramps experienced. It means that they are the same. Or our alternative hypothesis to be there is a difference in muscle cramps experience. Now let's try this in SPSS. I'll just edit this data over here from groups instead of the values being placebo and vaccine. I'll change this to boys, 1 for boys, 2 for girls, and click OK. Now I'll change the variable name of symptoms to muscle cramps. I'll check the level of measurements. This would be nominal, this would be ordinal. Now let's input the data. In the table over here, there are only 4 boys, but there are 5 girls. Therefore, I'll only put 4 boys here and 5 girls. Now to analyze this data using the Mann Whitney U Test, again we go to Analyze, Non-Parametrics Test, Legacy Dialogues, 2 independent samples. Mann Whitney U, hit OK. Our test statistic would be equal to 0.016 and it is less than 0.05. Therefore, the decision would be to reject the null hypothesis. The conclusion would be to accept the alternative hypothesis, or the data provided sufficient evidence that there is a difference in muscle cramps experienced from the boys and the girls. Now remember, to check your answer, you always need to ask yourself, does the answer make sense? If you look at the table, clearly there is a difference. Girls experience more cramps than boys. Now that is how you check your statistical inference. So that's it for this video. For more tutorials on statistical analysis using SPSS, save this playlist and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.